larger global companies like Gucci essentially see retail stores as three-dimensional advertisements. They don't really care if you buy your handbag there, your shoes there. They want to attach their brand to the coolness of downtown Detroit.
That was the voice of Dr. Conrad Kickert talking about the future of retail and how spaces in downtowns are changing. It's been a big question in Detroit. With some longtime retail establishments leaving, are we losing momentum after the pandemic? What about the office workers that have not come back? Conrad, with his global experience, makes a strong case that what's happening here and in some suburbs is not unique, that what we do with our retail spaces is fundamentally changing as the pandemic recedes from the common consciousness. I'm Jer Stays. Welcome to episode 1033 of Your Daily Detroit for Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. Remember that our work is brought to you by people like you, our members at patreon.com/dailydetroit. Joining me on the line, Dr. Conrad Kickert. He's an assistant professor, Department of Architecture at the University of Buffalo, as well as an author. He's got a book coming up that I'm excited to hear about because, I am nerdy like that. It's called Street Level Architecture, the Past, Present, and Future of Interactive Frontages. Conrad, welcome back to Daily Detroit. We had this great conversation. People really enjoyed it, all about retail, all about street life. And then the world shut down on us, man.
Yes, thanks for having me. You're right. The world did shut down. The world changed. So I'm really happy to be talking to you again.
Yeah, I am too. There have been some real big developments in Detroit since then. And, one of the reasons I like talking to you is that you give us a more international and national perspective of what's happening. It's so easy to look at the local headlines and say, oh, is this a Detroit thing? Is this a local thing? Is this a national thing? And I figure maybe the best place to start is the news that's captured a lot of attention, being that a Gucci store is coming to downtown Detroit. And off the air, before we got started, you shared with me something really interesting that kind of made my head spin a little bit.
Gucci, of course, congratulations. I will probably never be able to buy anything at the Gucci store, but this is in many ways the future of retail. So larger global companies like Gucci essentially see retail stores as three-dimensional advertisements. They don't really care if you buy your handbag there, your shoes there. They want to attach their brand to the coolness of downtown Detroit. As much as everything is changing, downtown Detroit to me is still a very cool and hip and happening place. So Gucci has the cash. They said, okay, let's do this. Let's attach our brand to downtown Detroit. People will walk past. They'll look at their stuff. And Gucci then doesn't mind where you will end up buying the handbag or the shoes. It might be, it might be elsewhere. It might be online. It might be in a mall, at Saks Fifth Avenue, whatever it is. But you saw the handbag where it's supposed to be in downtown Detroit. You're going to see that more often, but you've also seen the downsides of that. The fashion retail world is hurting badly. So there's also brands like Madewell that have very much the same format. They just want to attach their brand to a downtown space. And they ran out of money. That's not anything to do with downtown Detroit. It's just the way that fashion retail is right now. They're burning through money like no others because, people either don't go to a store anymore to buy a pair of pants. They buy 5 of them online and return 4 of them. And, logistically, that's very, very difficult to do. So just in general, in fashion retail, there's a bit of a shakeout going on. So please, Detroit, don't see it as your fault. The sort of fashion stores are going out of business. But you're going to see these global brands still wanting to be in a really interesting historical place like downtown Detroit. So my only question is, who's next? I will see the glass is half full.
That makes a lot of sense. I also think about, and this is on background from a number of people, I've been able to suss that the Bedrock people have been providing a lot of support to these retail establishments throughout the pandemic. Why do you think that they've been so generous with that?
in a sense, like downtown Detroit is very, very lucky to have a developer or asset manager that sees the bigger picture. Similar, by the way, to cities like Cincinnati that have 3CDC, which is a nonprofit developer. And essentially, what they see is these retail units as adding value to the bigger picture of downtown. So these are, for instance, the same people that hold apartments and condos nearby and offices, although we can talk about offices. So they see these retail units as so-called loss leaders. So loss leaders are places that don't really need to make money per se, so they don't really need the rental income because they add value essentially to make the rent upstairs more, because you want to live close to a restaurant, you want to live close to a cool shop, you want to make sure that your streets are vibrant. Yeah, a lot of the vibrancy of streets, of course, come from commercial units like retailers, bars, and restaurants. So in a sense, you're lucky in that. There's a lot of cities that don't have that just have a landlord for a retail unit. They need to make a profit. Larger owners like Bedrock don't on these ground floor units.
That's so interesting, because I think a lot of people assume that they need to make a profit on every single thing. And, especially a bigger company would watch that bottom line. But it seems like to you, what you're sharing is that there are landlords out there that are saying, hey, this is part of a bigger picture when it comes to services for my employees, my residents, things like that.
That's correct. And it's not altruism, by the way. It's not just a service to my employees. They literally know and they can calculate that a ground floor retail unit pays itself back many times over in higher rents for upstairs, either offices or homes. So if a single owner owns the entire building, they don't have to make money on the ground floor. They just see the ground floor as adding value to the upstairs. In the case of downtown Detroit and downtown Cincinnati, or over the Rhine in Cincinnati, these are owners of entire districts. So, yeah, they can really play with profits and losses and have things essentially cross-subsidize one another.
Yeah, I saw some of that in Columbus, Ohio as well, with the Short North and some things that are happening there.
Yeah, it's true. It's an increasingly common model in the Midwest. Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati are the three C's of Ohio, and then Detroit as well. Even in a place as small as Erie, Pennsylvania, so they have a downtown really, really struggling, a large local corporation or a group of corporations in the hospital system saying, we want to invest in the downtown to make it more attractive, and we are willing to take a loss on the retail units. That, by the way, doesn't mean that you get free rent or something, but this is something that you had mentioned before, sort of a percentage rent. So, for instance, the rent is a percentage of your sales, which essentially means that the developer becomes almost like an equity partner. They share some of the risk. If your sales are lousy, they will not make any money. If your sales are great, I guess they will make a lot of money.
And that's been around for a long time. Like, I look back to an old lease agreement for the Hudson's in Eastland Mall, and that first lease agreement had a share of rent in it.
Yeah, this is actually very common in mall operations, percentage rent, maybe a little bit of a startup bonus. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of these startup packages because, a business needs to be viable or it's not viable. But a percentage lease, it's quite common. It's quite common. And again, the mall operator is one of these ideal examples. They can cross-subsidize. They own the entire thing, right? So they can take a loss on certain tenants and they can make a profit on others. And it's really the case of trying to find the right mixture of businesses. That's what really draws people to your mall, or in the case of downtown Detroit, that's what draws people to a downtown. Of course, I don't want to say that downtowns are malls. They really aren't, because there's people living, there's people working in downtown as well. But, it's the ground floor that attracts us the most. That's what we see when we walk through a place, right? But just understand that what you are walking through on the sidewalk of downtown Detroit is courtesy of the rents of the people that live and work upstairs. I can tell you that.
Interesting. I wonder how that fits with smaller businesses. You talk about, that kind of like 3D advertisement presence, online, offline. We had a number of small businesses, throw in the towel. Some of them, I really do think, after a while, 5-6 years as a small business staying the same size is a really hard line to pull. Like that's just a difficult lifestyles situation. I think that's part of it.
Yep.
But also, how does that impact the idea of a smaller business when, maybe you don't have that same scale of online, offline? Is that going to affect them?
It's really, really difficult. That's the $1,000,000 question, right? So in a lot of ways, smaller businesses are more agile than larger corporations. Think of like Macy's, sort of the Titanic trying to move that business model around. But yeah, you are exactly correct. I mean, the scale of this, what I call omni-channel business, which, by the way, omni-channel, just quick explanation, essentially is you can buy stuff in the store, you can buy stuff online, you can buy stuff with your cell phone, and it's all pretty seamless. If you buy stuff online, you can pick it up in the store or the other way around. Yeah, that takes a lot of money. Logistics are expensive. So you are 100% correct. Small businesses are really struggling to make that happen. An interesting aside is, one of the big platforms that is trying to make that more easy for small businesses was Shopify. Shopify is now in the news this week as having to lay off 1,000 people, 10% of its workforce, because they kind of overestimated the post-pandemic demand for e-commerce. Shopify essentially is a platform for small businesses to sell their stuff online. And, a lot of people made the bet saying, okay, e-commerce is here to stay, brick and mortar, maybe not so much. And they kind of overshot that one. So, but yeah, the $1,000,000 question is small businesses, how can you viably sell your stuff across channels in a store and online? But I feel that there's no other way out for small businesses. They're going to have to play ball. And don't forget, by the way, the majority of small retail businesses actually just run online. They run from a living room. They run through a platform like Shopify or Amazon, controversially, right? They actually just only sell their stuff online. It might be a big investment for them to move into brick and mortar. By the way, the word of advice for Detroit is if you want a downtown that's cool, get those small businesses on sort of a pop-up format. One of the coolest formats I've seen recently, it's a British Army veteran, and he started this company called Souk, like a souk, Middle Eastern souk, and you can literally rent the store by the day or by the hour. So people will just go into a store. For instance, it's great for product launches, seeing something new, and that has been proven a massive success. People want to see something new, and imagine that there's a storefront space on Woodward Avenue, and every day there's something new in there. Every day there's a new cool product, or sometimes it's foundations, or sometimes it's a meeting space. There's still far more ideas than there are spaces. So I still have very high hopes for these street level spaces.
And that really leans into the idea of experiential marketing that we, in this
Yes.
world as it is today, listeners will know we went through a studio fire. That studio was an experience, and the next thing will be an experience as well, because that's part of the whole magic of the thing. And I think that's so crucial. Now, looking forward, we kind of joked at the beginning that, the world stopped, the world changed. What are a couple of the key trends that you're seeing in cities? And again, as you were saying with the other stuff, Detroit is not alone in dealing with this stuff. So what are some of the key trends that you're seeing going forward?
Well, there's a couple of things that are likely to happen. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, but there's a couple of things that are already happening. First of all, just a very unfortunate thing that's happening on the upper floors is office work. Now, I'm Dutch originally. Hybrid work has been quite common in many European countries, but not so much in the United States, where until quite recently you were supposed to show up 9 to 5. That's now really changing. That's really going to change the landscape for downtown Detroit. Already you're seeing these sort of lunchtime restaurants. Yeah, they're struggling because quite the percentage of people haven't returned. I heard you mention 40% is back. That means 60% is not. People are not going to come back for 5 days a week. They might come back for 2 days a week. That then brings the very existential question, what is a downtown for? Is it for working? Is it a place that you have to be? It's going to have to increasingly turn into a place that you want to be. Offices might get converted into residential. Downtown Detroit, by the way, is very lucky in that sense. You have a lovely supply of older office buildings, and they don't just look good. They're far easier to transform into residential spaces. So I would expect some of those conversions to happen at some point. And a lot of what I'm studying right now is what I call post-retail. This is also a chapter in my book, is there will be storefronts that will just never be a store or a bar or a restaurant. By the way, short term, I would expect bars and restaurants to do really, really well as they are right now. But it's a very, very economically sensitive use, right? As soon as the economy, there's a downturn, those uses will struggle. So if you think more sort of bigger picture, storefronts will just never be a commercial use, a shop, a bar, a restaurant. What could it then become, right? And if you think, for instance, on the future of work, so no longer 9 to 5, but people do want to get out of their house to work. I really hope that you're rebuilding a studio somewhere that's not in your house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then people go, for instance, into co-working spaces. Co-working is a bit of a, mixed path, right? We've all heard the WeWork story, but I still have very high hopes for that. So maybe some of these street-level units will become co-working spaces. Spaces where you work on healthcare, for example. So if you walk through Manhattan, there's a lot of sort of healthcare providers that are going into these storefront units. But also, for instance, community uses. What about like small libraries or daycares, for example? This is really just to say that, what if a downtown really becomes almost like a self-sufficient, live, work, play type of place, which is what we've been talking about for decades, but haven't really done, right? Like downtown was just kind of the place you went to at 9 a.m, you left at 5, and then you would go, in the case of Detroit, on the evening or in the weekend to have a good time. What if it's a place that you could live, send your kids to daycare, take care of your daily business? And this, in our field of architecture and urban design, is increasingly known as the 15-minute city. So is this a type of city where you could find everything you need in your daily life in 15 minutes? I have high hopes, but it's going to mean new, weird uses on the ground floor in these shop fronts and expensive conversions, I must admit, for some of the upper floors.
So what are some of the buildings you think that might be good targets? In my mind, although the ownership is kind of a pain right now, the Penobscot building, it would be one where it's older setup, it has more windows, that even though some of the windows look in, you've got kind of a smaller floor plate and that you could kind of make work for apartments.
Yep. So think of these sort of 1920s skyscrapers. So exactly, right? Guardian, Penobscot. Yeah, they would be great. I think they would be really nice places to live. But you're right. It all has to do with ownership. Is the owner enlightened enough? By the way, neither of those buildings are what you would call Class A office space. So what that means is sort of like your highest class, your most expensive office space. I will say is that newer buildings, like, for instance, the Renaissance Center, may be a lot more difficult to convert. This is going to sound really nerdy. It's essentially a technical thing. These older buildings have shallower floor plates because older offices didn't have proper lighting, so they need to get daylight. And guess what? We like to live in places that have daylight as well, so they actually make for pretty nice apartments. Newer office buildings, of course, have these really, really deep floor plates, little cubicles that never see the light of day. And for some reason, we've accepted that as a workplace, but we don't accept that as a place to live. You don't want to have a bedroom that doesn't really have a window. So you're going to see these older buildings that's much more easier to convert into apartments.
Interesting. So change is ahead, and we just kind of got to be ready for it. And kind of what I'm hearing is not freak out about it, but embrace it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's easier said than done, of course. I mean, if you're the owner of one of these buildings and you're seeing your occupancy rates plummet, you're not in a good place right now. I'll just be very honest, because conversions are expensive. If you're Bedrock, I would assume that you're in a much better place because, you have a much larger and broader ownership. And I find they're very smart people. I'm sure they're thinking of sort of reprofiling what the downtown is. And they already hold quite a nice mixture of workplaces and of places to live. It might become less work, more live, So it really just depends on who you are. But as a city, I certainly would embrace it. And it's very interesting you mention that. That also means city leadership, right? So don't see the closure of a retailer just as a loss. See it also as an opportunity. I did research in the Netherlands, where I'm from, and it turns out that a lot of these older closed shops now hold small creative offices. Turns out that the knowledge economy, or creative economy, actually that little ecosystem thrives again in places that used to hold a shop, So now we're going from consumption to production, which is also fine.
That sounds fascinating to me. And, I think about outside of downtown as well. Yeah, I think about neighborhoods that have these storefronts that have been inactive for a long time. And I think of some inner ring suburbs that could benefit off of this.
Yep, exactly. So let's just say that the main downtown, Woodward Avenue, side streets, they'll probably find a commercial use again. You might find some smaller side streets where that's not the case. But in a lot of these other streets, you're really going to have to think and, just not lie to yourself. Say, oh, no, any day now, a retailer is going to call me and say, Conrad, this is the best space. Please, let me lease your space. And think of another use. Because you got to remember, everything is better than vacancies. You just let something sit vacant because it doesn't fit into your picture, either economic picture or your political picture of what a shop should be. It should be a place where you buy stuff. It's just a loss. Empty storefronts bring down surrounding values. They are not nice to walk along, and they're just kind of a hole in the urban fabric. So any new use that you can think of for these spaces is a benefit.
For sure. Of course, you've got that book coming, Street Level Architecture, The Past, Present, and Future of Interactive Frontages, which I feel like is the kind of book that a Roman Mars would want to pick up right away, to be very honest.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, who knows?
And people will be able to pick that up when?
I think it's, you never know, but I think it's launching early August. Find it in your bookstore or on Amazon. But you can find it from early August onward.
Well, Conrad Kickert, I always appreciate you. And I look forward to our next chat.
All right. Thanks very much.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. 3 housekeeping notes before I go. 1, thanks for the super strong response about Northville and downtown Northville. Got multiple notes about it, including one amazing itinerary that I need to respond to. It hit a nerve and is a place you all seem to like. I'll look into it more. Dr. Paul Thomas will be coming on this week to talk about insulin prices, low childhood vaccination rates, and no, not really about COVID, and what to know about monkeypox. If you've got questions for him or show suggestions, dailydetroit@gmail.com. I am all ears. And finally, Cheyenne found 1 broke box of cans of black cherry Vernors for us to try, so expect that on Friday with Devin. Apparently, a lot of people are having trouble finding it, but we got a hold of it. So with that, thank you so much for listening. I'm Jer Stays. Remember that you are somebody, and I'll see you around Detroit.